Very warm welcome to Gavin Lockyer and to Arafura Resources. COVID buster, it's been how miserable is it being imprisoned? So we've gone online. That's a big step for us. And we're going to run these around about every 2 weeks. So we're hoping to really keep the content up to you, because we certainly all miss those wonderful warm Sydney Mining Club forums where we all get together and there's that terrific buzz in the room. This is a pale imitation, but we'll do them more frequently, and we're hoping, just standing by actually to get it. The next one, Aaron Brannigan from Cadia to address us, and it's the biggest gold mine in Australia, and it's on our doorstep, so that's sort of round the corner. Mark Kutafani, another homeboy, has thrown his hat in the ring, so we'll have quite a rich series of these coming up, and we'll serve you all as best we can. And thanks for putting up with our respective premiers for a start, but thanks for putting up with the format. As usual, I'd like to give a very warm thank you to our sponsors. And they are, of course, the main sponsors are AME Group and BDA, Geos Mining, Mineral Consultants, New South Wales Mining, Minerals Council, CRU, Sydney Stock Exchange, Australian Resources and Investment Magazine, ANZ Bank, APM, Empire Energy. Got some big news happening up there in the Territory. RAS, which is reporting as a service for Nola Burke, AMEC, Association of Mining and Exploration Companies, which are very active in the small sector, Hetherington Title Services, Deloitte, the accounting firm, and Veritas, the mighty broking firm with the Reynolds brothers. So, look, as I always say, please, they're the people that make the world go round. So, look, in other news, the mining industry is, of course, running the country still, thankfully, despite everything. Thermal coal prices are at record highs, which is just astonishing. Things like even uranium's belting along. There's a lot of interest around the world now in small modular reactors, and people are starting to see a big future for uranium. I don't know whether that's a driver, but certainly an interesting bit of news. Canada is leading the small modular reactor sector at the moment. I've been in touch with it. It's quite amazing how fast nuclear has leapt from the past into the future over these last few years. Of course, driven by the energy transition. A little bit of news from of course, gold's also rocketing along steady and looking good. But I had some great news this morning that came in from Bernard Rowe at Ioneer Resources, Ioneer Mining, whatever they are. But Bernard Rowe is, of course, another homeboy from Sydney, and they've scored an amazing deal with Sibanye-Stillwater, which is a $10 billion company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, for their deposit over there in the US. They've got a 50-50 joint venture where Sibanye puts up $490 million in to build the mine. So their discovery, well done, fellas, and that's a hell of a big free carry to production. So doesn't get much better than that. I think with that, those few introductory words, probably a good time to go and find Gavin, who is in the mighty West. If Gavin's, of course, ready to tell us a bit about the mighty Nolans project, shovel ready. Here he is coming up on my screen, and we're about to cross over, and I'll hand over and welcome to our first online Sydney Mining Club. Gavin, nice to see you, and exciting project. I'll leave you to take it away. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Julian. Thanks for your introduction, and thank you everybody for tuning in today. Yes, I'm sitting here in Perth. I'd like to say sunny Perth, but another winter snap has hit us. But I guess we are at least fortunate to be able to get out and about and enjoy the good and bad weather, unlike our colleagues on the East Coast. So we hope that everybody's remaining safe and can come out of this lockdown as soon as possible. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I will talk to you about our Arafura resources. Our ASX code is ARU, and our flagship project is the Nolans project. So I've got a fairly bulky presentation, which and by no means I intend to go through each slide one by one, but I won't dwell and read out everything. So I hope to get through this in about probably 20 minutes, and then leave a fair bit of time open for questions at the end. So the first few slides talk about really the global situation as we stand at the moment, and then we talk a bit more about the project, and then at the back end it's the NdPr demand supply area in particular. So at the moment, we'd all be aware that there's two big revolutions underway through digitalisation and decarbonisation. And Australia is really at a great point in time to benefit from these opportunities. We've seen a great deal of interest from our various governments, both working bilaterally with the US and other regions to advance the critical mineral space. And obviously, many of you would be familiar with the battery materials of lithium, cobalt, graphite, copper, nickel, etc. But the next revolution really is what is that battery source, or that energy source? What is it driving? And inevitably, it'll be a rare earth magnet-driven electric motor, and that's the focus of Arafura and our rare earth project. We are a shovel-ready project, and we're ready to supply between 5 to 10% of the world's NdPr. Just going back a little bit, what are rare earths? They're used in everyday use. Many of you would be aware of what they are, but for those of you that don't, NdPr, neodymium praseodymium, does the heavy lifting inside a rare earth magnet, which is also containing iron and boron, and they go into a range of applications which are driving society today. Many of you will have, like me, when you were growing up, you would have had a stereo speaker that was quite large with a big iron magnet that sat at the back. These days we have two little rare earth magnets in each ear for our iPhone earbuds, etc. And that's a rare earth magnet, and that's the type of things that rare earth magnets can do. They make things smaller and more efficient. Hence the reason they're being used in many applications, replacing hydraulics. And I guess the growth area is obviously wind turbines and in electric vehicles. So what does this look like for future demand and supply? I think the EV market in particular, and we'll focus on EVs, even though NdPr is used in a range of industries. EVs is the growing area, and most analysts are forecasting somewhere between 8 to 10 to 40 times growth in demand over the next 20 years, and this will require 6 to 15 times more rare earth elements. And the charts you can see on your screen at the moment highlight the differences between stated policy scenarios. So that's the status quo as what's been announced publicly by automakers and by governments around what they expect the EV growth to be. But then the sustainable development scenario, which is right at the end, that reflects the requirements for total mineral demand for new electric vehicles if we are to achieve the Paris Agreement goals on climate change by 2050. So even if we're halfway there, you can still see that there's a big requirement for more and more minerals going forward. One of the things that has happened in recent times, and COVID has really highlighted this to the auto sector, is that last year, when a lot of the magnet factories had to close in China, many of the automakers, in Germany actually had to shut their plants before Europe went into lockdown, and it's simply because they couldn't get the rare earth magnets out of China. And we're seeing a very similar case happen at the moment with semiconductors coming out of Taiwan. Both the semiconductors and the rare earth magnets represent less than 1% of the overall cost of the vehicle, but without it, you do not have the vehicle. And so this is a real mindset change for the auto sector and the OEMs to get their head around, because historically they've gone, supply has not been an issue. China's been able to increase supply as and when required, but we're seeing more and more that China won't be able to do that going forward. And as an overall example, you can see there the various minerals that are required for an electric vehicle, or the key critical ones, and the rare earth elements, whilst they represent a relatively low dollar value, they are critical, and they're forecast to grow exponentially in the next few years. And this has been a discussion that I've had with the federal government in particular, but also the Northern Territory government, that Australia is changing. Australia no longer wants to just dig things up and ship it out, and the way we can change, because we do have the critical minerals here in this country, is to start doing some downstream processing. And the critical minerals, whilst they're not necessarily large volumes, so we're not exporting millions of tons. In fact, we'll only produce about 4,500 tons of NdPr oxide per annum, but that represents a significant value add that can occur here in Australia. And by 2022, the energy transition minerals are forecast to basically exceed the value of our coal exports, which I think is a pretty interesting stat. Moving on now more specifically to the Nolans project. As I said, it's advanced manufacturing. It's a very simple mining operation. About 10 to 15% of our capital and operating cost is just mining and beneficiation. The rest of it is all in the minerals processing and the hydrometallurgical processes that is ultimately producing a 99.999% pure neodymium praseodymium oxide powder. It looks very much like talcum powder. That's how pure it is. The magnets speak for themselves, and our production target, which is in late 2024, is aligned with some forecast supply shortages, which I'll expand on a bit later on. Where we're located, 135 kilometres north of Alice Springs, straight up the Stewart Highway, so very accessible, 10 kilometres off the highway, sitting right behind the Aileron Roadhouse, which has served as a camp for exploration and other activities when we're on site. We've got on the diagram to the bottom left there, you can see a red line going diagonally through that. That is the Amadeus gas pipeline. So our processing plant will be built adjacent to that to tap in for power. We've got the Alice Springs, as I said, it's only 135 kilometres to the south, population of about 26,000 people, and with good rail connections north-south between Adelaide and Darwin for bringing reagents in and out. The other advantage by where we're at is that we are remote, but we're not isolated. We're remote in the fact that we can undertake our mining operations without really upsetting too many neighbours, but it also allows us to deal with all our wastes at site as well. And this has been extremely important, as many of you may have followed the Linus story. They've got, they do their processing in Malaysia, and storage of the waste has raised its head a couple of times in their story. So we've got our full environmental approvals, and both at federal level and at territory level, which encompasses the actual rehabilitation of the site, but also the waste management. We've signed a native title agreement with the traditional owners. We have an Indigenous engagement strategy in place, which forms part of our wider Australian industry participation plan. We've got our mining licenses granted, completed our DFS in 2019, and we provided an update to the market earlier this year. And we successfully completed a capital raising of $45 million just recently, which has allowed us to appoint Hatch Engineering as the lead engineer for the front-end engineering and design of the hydrometallurgical plant. We're targeting FID around this time next year, and that will be subject to offtake agreements being signed and also project funding being identified and clarified. Earlier this year, we were really pleased to see the federal government get behind us in two ways. Firstly was with a letter of support from the Northern Australian Infrastructure Fund, which was for $100 million. And secondly, through Export Finance Australia, which was for $200 million. These are conditional letters of support for 15-year debt, basically, which is mainly conditional upon us receiving fixed price EPC contracts following our FEED program, but also identifying our having more refined information around the term sheets for other debt facilities and also our offtake agreements, which we're working on. So as I said, we currently sit sort of in the middle of that chart there. We're targeting a final investment decision by this time next year, and then first production by the end of 2024, which we believe is extremely critical because that is when most analysts are forecasting that China will become a net importer of this material. The ore to oxide at a single site, I think this is something that I'll just stop on for a minute because it's extremely important, not just to our customers, but I think to our investors as well. We are the only NdPr oxide-focused project in Australia that is currently planning to mine and process ore to oxide at a single site. And this makes us a non-Chinese supplier of choice in terms of sustainability. Next year, there's legislation that will be introduced into the EU that requires OEMs to look through their supply chains around sourcing of raw materials for their product. Historically, they would typically just go back to the magnet producer or the component producer to make sure that they meet the European standards. The new legislation will require them to go back through the magnet producer and actually determine where is the critical minerals, the rare earths or the raw materials coming from, back to the mining operation. And many operations in China will not meet the ESG standards for the Europeans, and this will pose a problem for procurement officers globally. And so Arafura offers an ESG sustainably mined NdPr oxide. We've got traceability over the product, and we've also got traceability over our waste. We've also undertaken a few initiatives ahead of the game. There's a group called IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining, which we've undertaken an IRMA Ready assessment standard. We can't do the full standard because we're not in production, but we've undertaken the preliminary assessment, and we'll obviously move into the full assessment once we're in production. We've got some technology we're employing whereby utilizing basically a blockchain type of arrangement, we can track the block of ore all the way through to the magnet. So we'll be able to say to the automaker, this magnet was produced from ore that came from this block at Arafura's Nolans project, and allow that that traceability. There's also some other ongoing R&D that we're doing to try and work out, to try and explore opportunities in further downstream manufacturing and also further applications for NdPr product. Our customers are typically offshore. Our target for our offtake strategy has been to focus on those those jurisdictions that aren't necessarily aligned with the China Made in 2025 strategy. The China 2025 strategy is around China dominating the electric vehicle market, both in components and electric vehicle production. So naturally, the typical car maker jurisdictions of Japan, South Korea, and the EU are extremely concerned about this. And as you'll see in a future slide, once China is becoming a much larger importer of raw materials, and that is simply to meet its own demand requirements. So there may be a point very soon where China can't even produce material that it can export because it needs it for itself. At the moment, we're in varying discussions with potential off-takers. Many of them would be familiar with you as household names. I'm sure many of you drive the automobiles that are badged with these companies. And we're in a range of off-take discussions in terms of advanced term sheets. We're talking volumes, we're talking pricing mechanisms. And if we were to sign every transaction that we currently have under discussion, we'd actually have secured 120% of our production. Our plan is, and we think this is based on our discussions with financiers, to get about 85% of our forecast production under offtake prior to going into FID, which, as I said, is this time next year. Taking a step back now to NdPr supply and demand specifically, you know, I've talked about the auto sector growing exponentially, but you can see here that you know, the world needs more projects. It simply does. And people historically would say the argument that, oh well, the Chinese will just crank up supply. I'll show you a couple of slides coming up which shows that they can't. Lynas will expand production. This is factored in here. People are saying that Iluka will come on board. Iluka currently exports material to China, and that is currently included in these numbers. So Iluka coming on board is not going to change this dynamic dramatically. And so the world does need more projects, and I think we'd all agree that the world needs more projects outside of China. Interesting stat, which is right down the bottom of that slide there, that says China's import of rare earth metal ores jumped 84% just a couple of months ago. And this is imported ores from Mountain Pass or Molycorp in MP Materials in America, Iluka, and other rare earth monazite feedstocks. So China is becoming a much larger consumer of these materials, and they're moving away from their mining and putting all their efforts into manufacturing. Chinese inventory stockpiles have decreased over the last year, and the chart there shows you that the NdPr price that's now settled around, it's only showing there in June at $70 a kilo. It's actually about $90 a kilo and has been there for the last 2 months. But the inventory levels have gone down since this time last year, and it's against the global EV sales, which in the bottom chart there you can see year on year are significantly greater than last year, and this is not expected to discontinue. This is only expected to continue greatly, and at the same time the Chinese NdPr oxide production has remained pretty stable. And in terms of their utilization rates, and this is where, you know, the Chinese can't just simply turn the switch on and flood the market like they perhaps have done in the past. The top chart there shows the utilization rates of light rare earth plants, of which neodymium, praseodymium are, and you can see that most of them are around 90 to 100% capacity. Any new capacity that is built will have to meet much higher ESG standards, and therefore there will be a cost involved in that. And so the historically prices that have been artificially low, we don't believe, and most analysts don't believe, are sustainable. So prices of around $90 a kilo represent, I think, a fair value where we're at the moment. And you know, only 6 months ago, most analysts that were covering this space would say that any new project that requires development needs a floor price of about $65 a kilo. So we're well and truly inside those margins. And you know, who do you believe around global EV sales? Or sorry, forecasts. Everybody's got their own view, but you know, I think generally speaking, the trend is extremely favourable. And this is my my last slide, but it's extremely important when you're looking at rare earth projects to identify where exactly in the food chain they're feeding. So Arafura, we are taking it all the way through to a rare earth oxide, NdPr oxide, point number 4 on that chart. And that's important because only by producing an oxide can you actually feed outside the Chinese supply chain. By producing an NdPr oxide, we have also in place a tolling arrangement with a company in Vietnam and Thailand that can convert that NdPr oxide to a metal, which can then be fed into a magnet producer that sits outside China. Anybody else that is producing a mineral concentrate or a rare earth compound of, let's say, a rare earth carbonate, that product will have to go into China to be separated, and there is no guarantee that that product will come out. That also creates issues around stewardship of waste. Many of you would be familiar with mineral sands. There's lots of typically higher levels of radiation are associated with monazite materials. So if monazite materials are being exported to China, how do we as an organisation make sure that the waste or the radioactive waste is being disposed of responsibly? And I think that will become a large issue for many of the customers downstream, as they'll want to seek the surety of that. And that's something that Arafura can obviously provide. So I do have some appendices in case there's particular questions, but that basically brings me to the end of my my presentation. So I'll stop sharing and hand the microphone back to you, Julian.
Do the old unmute. Thanks so much, Gavin. Just got a couple of questions there. I've got a couple just to lead off. Take me through the metallurgy here. Like, what's the mineral? How do we grind it up? What sort of size? How do we do the separation? How do we create the concentrate? Is it gravity in the end? I mean, it's a pretty dense material, I presume.
Look, I might just share my screen again and explain. I've got a slide on that, and it refers to the to a lot of the test work that we've actually done, which is an important point. So thank you for raising it. So look, it's predominantly an apatite hosted ore body, which is obviously a phosphate material. And so the process is really, it's quite a simple beneficiation float circuit at the front. So it's just, you know, stock standard flotation. And that then, what we've discovered is that the phosphate floats pretty well. So we take that and then put it through basically a fertilizer process at the front end, and then we go into a more traditional rare earth process at the back end. So people say, you know, why can you send this material to China or even to, say, Lynas for processing? The answer is yes, we could, but we just wouldn't get the recoveries that we get from our own unique flow sheet.
Yeah. Okay. So you're digesting the apatite mineral, which presumably comes out of an igneous rock of some sort. Once you've concentrated it, you're digesting it with phosphoric acid, yeah?
Yes, that's correct. So we actually kickstart the process with a bit of sulfuric acid. That basically, in simple chemistry, it unlocks the apatite or the phosphate. And what we discovered, which is a fairly standard wet phosphate process for the fertilizer industry, and what we discovered is that if we can clean up that phosphoric acid and recirculate it, we use less sulfuric acid, and the phosphate basically starts digesting itself or digests the apatite concentrate. And then as that builds up in the circuit, we bleed that off as a phosphoric acid. We will produce about 140,000 tonnes per annum of phosphoric acid, P2O5, which will feed into the fertiliser market. But the advantage of this process at the front end, it's basically chemical beneficiation, for want of a better term.
Yep.
It actually cleans up the rare earth streams quite nicely. So when we go into the acid bake, which is the standard rare earth extraction process, we don't have to do it at high temperatures like others have to do it at. We can do it at around 250 degrees Celsius as opposed to 800 degrees Celsius, and we don't have to have long rotary kilns, etc., that can be problematic. We can actually do this in a big sort of mixing bowl, which is much simpler from an operations perspective. Then that process is pretty much a standard rare earth technology, and then we obviously go down to the rare earth separation, which is not done other than Lynas, not done outside of China, anywhere else in the world.
Okay, I've got a thanks for that. I've got a question came in. Just obviously somebody's been writing with their thumbs here, and it's not the best English in the world, I have to say. Underpinning this project is how realistic the current mineral resource is. Grade estimate at the specified cutoff. Consequently, what percentage of the composite within the mineral resource estimate volume are above or equal? Now, if you can read anything into that, you're doing better than.
Well, I'm a finance guy, but I'll do my best, and I don't understand JORC to the nth degree, because I think I'm not one of the biggest supporters of JORC. But look, over 70% of our composite assays of mineralisation exceed the 1% REO grade that we use in the resource statement.
Another one here. How much water and energy is needed per tonne of NdPr? From David Novak, of course, who is also a pretty good on wet chemistry.
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that one per kilo. We're using about, I think, 40 gig of water per annum in the plant. I will take that one on notice too.
The question was asked per tonne of NdPr product.
Per tonne,
so, yeah, if you want to answer that, and we can happily get you in touch with David Nolan, who's come up there.
Yeah, please do. That's a stat I should know, so I apologise for that.
Yep, okay. Tell us a bit about the territory, of course. I know from experiences that I won't mention here, that the bureaucracy in the territory is pretty enormous. And also, to that extent, the mining industry, what have we had? We've had the granites, Tanamite region. We've got the Jervois lead zinc coming on. Couple of gold mines up Pine Creek Way. Ranges closed. I mean, it's sort of there's that iron deposit right up in Arnhem Land that I think they're trying to restart. It's not great. It's still in a sort of, wonderful potential, but still in the territory's in a fairly nascent stage. I mean, hopefully it'll come around the bend. What kind of support are you looking at? It's not, I guess what I'm saying is Tennant Creek isn't Kalgoorlie. What sort of engineering support are you going to have out there?
Good question. I think you started off with the government. Look, we've had good relationships with the NT government. Yep, they work a little bit differently to other jurisdictions, and it wouldn't be the first time I've said to the NT government, if I could pick the resource up and put it in WA, I would. But having said that, we do have very strong support from the government. They're very keen to see this project get up and running. They've got some fairly bold aspirations to become, to grow their own GDP, and they see Nolans as being a critical part of that. In terms of engineering, look, there is limited engineering capabilities in the territory. Certainly for the support industries that will require, we'll be looking to source that as locally as we possibly can. But I think through construction, you can probably rest assured that most of it will be FIFO. Once we're in steady state, though, we'll hire about 300 odd people on an operating basis. And look, we've been really trying to encourage people to come and live in the territory and work from Alice Springs. We can offer them a much more friendly roster if they do that. And so, we hope that some of those initiatives will pay fruition over time.
Yeah, thank you. And I must say, if anybody tuned in right now has any thoughts at all about Alice Springs, I recently was there and went through, opened up the real estate section and had a good look at it. And there's some fabulous places to, it's such a great place to live. Love the Alice and love the desert. And certainly I'm actually love to get myself a little place there. Anyway, just to have it is a gorgeous place. And your supplies, I guess, will be coming out of, you've got Mount Isa is probably your nearest big hitting mining centre for engineering, right?
Yeah, but, we've also got Roxby down south and, Whyalla. So yep. There are opportunities in the region.
Oh, of course, you've got the train there as well. So, look, yep. I've got a follow-up question from David Novak here, which is, what is the recovery rate of NdPr by the end of the SX circuit from the in-situ ore, which is a great general question too. So what's your percentage recovery from ore grade to product?
Yep, it's it's over 80% from ROM all the way through to SX.
And are those losses largely in the gravity stage, getting the apatite
out? Yes, pretty much.
I know I'm hammering a finance guy on metallurgy here.
No, that's okay. I've had to learn the metallurgy along the way. Look, a lot of it is from there yep. in the flotation. However, there also are some losses in the acid bake.
You made the comment about the picking up your deposit and putting it in Western Australia. I think you'd probably have quite a long conga line of projects following you there. We do love the West. So the question comes in from David Royal. What are the key differences that you see between WA and the Northern Territory for mining, and what could be changed, government regulation or other? You've got to be a bit careful with these answers because the administration, you don't want to get their nose out of joint.
And they might be listening. Yeah, look, I think the Territory has their heart in the right place. I think it's resourcing that's their issue. I mean, they face the same challenges as any other regional place in Australia does. That attracting the right people to do the job is difficult. There's some very good, hardworking people within the various departments of the NTG. There's just probably not enough of them at times. Having said that, we do have our environmental approvals done and dusted. We've got our mining license in place, and through good work and close relationships with the land councils, we've got our native title agreement in place as well. So, I'd have to say, if there was an improvement, they really need to try and recruit and retain relevant individuals.
Yeah, and I thank you, and I think to that extent, probably highlighting Alice Springs as a place to live in is probably, it would be a big part of that, because a lot of people don't realise exactly how wonderful it is, and there's some exquisite opportunities to go into the land to see, people come from all around the world to of course, the rock and Katajuda and those things, but it is an amazing part of Australia. Look, thanks everyone. The questions are still coming in, and I had one from Kate Smith, who says, "Thanks, Gavin. Really interesting. What are you planning to do with the tailings? And that's a really, I mean, great thing about being in an arid zone is that, you know, tailings, of course, you just got to watch they don't get caught in the wind, but it's a, you know, it's so much better than in a wet environment or a closely populated environment.
Yep. Again, I might share a slide that I've got, but before I do, I've sort of sent a text message to my project manager whilst we've been speaking, and the water usage is just under 1 tonne of water per kilogram of NdPr oxide, and the power is roughly 60 kilowatts per hour per kilo.
And I'm guessing you've got good groundwater out there, right?
Yeah, look, one of the things we did was undertake, and one of the big enablers, which I didn't mention on the slide, was that we discovered a whole new aquifer to the south of the deposit, which is pretty large, and it's the testing we've done to date is shown that it's sustainable for the life of mine and beyond. I didn't mention that our life of mine is about 40 years. And that's just in the top 200 meters of vertical depth. It's exposed at surface. But we have also drilled 400 odd meters down and still been in mineralization. So this is a pretty significant deposit that's going to be around for a very long time. I'll quickly share my screen. Okay, so you know, our environmental approvals are based on this model here, which we've designed. And basically, so the tailings, the beneficiation and gypsum residue storage facility, you can see they're the larger 3 of those facilities. And then the water leach residue, which is the stuff that contains the radio elements, is a smaller cell. So the waste rock dumps are designed to encapsulate the naturally occurring radiation. Basically, the way we're designing this is that each of these will be progressively rehabilitated along the life of mine. So we'll build cell 1 and 2 for the first 7 to 8 years, then we'll progressively build the next cells and rehabilitate behind us. The rehabilitation itself is pretty stock standard, particularly for the tailings. But for the water leach residue, we do have to cover that with about probably 70 to 80 centimetres of topsoil, which returns the levels back to the local radiation levels. The problem we find in this region, and we've found it when we've been trying to rehabilitate drill holes, etc., is often the soil we're trying to cover, our drill core, our rock chips, is actually often more radioactive than the rock chips itself. So this is all naturally occurring, and it's pretty easily dealt with in the region. Okay,
that diagram was a little bit small when by the time we had your face next to it, but it showed a geometric pattern, and obviously the more difficult concentrates or tails are in the centre, and you use the you buffer around the outside with to enclose it.
Yep.
I've noticed we've got questions coming in on chat and also on the Q&A line. So I've got to look in 2 places, which is pretty tricky for a newcomer. What are the DFS numbers for OPEX and NdPr tonne sold and pre-production capex? So we got, in other words, I guess generally the question would be,
yep.
What are the DFS numbers for OPEX and capex?
Yep. So the operating costs are around. Sorry, I'll start with a big number. That's the capex. That's about $1 billion Australian dollars, 700 and something US, and that was in the DFS. And it was quite pleasing that when the DFS was done in February 2019, we actually did a market update earlier this year, and those numbers hadn't changed much. So that was quite pleasing, even though we'd done a lot more engineering and test programs to feed into that program. So it's $1 billion project, you know, and that's the big elephant in the room for us in terms of how does a 200 million market cap company raise that, which I can talk about if anybody's interested. But the other key that we knew we had to focus on was making sure that our operating cost was low, because when we started this exercise, China could artificially keep prices low. And so we know that we have to be in that lowest cost quartile. And so we've developed our flow sheet utilizing the phosphoric acid as a byproduct credit. And that gives us an operating cost of about $25 per kilogram of NdPr, which is in the lowest quartile.
Okay. I've got further on. I see Rod Elvish has asked a question. Rod, if you're asking more about tailings and waste storage, let me know if you've had enough on that, and I'll see your answer up here. Question from Quan Pham, who says, "What do you use to neutralise the acid leach solution, and does it get discharged back to the environment or recycle?" Well, whether you regard a tailings dam as a back to the environment, but take an answer to that, please.
Yeah, so the neutralizations are predominantly with gypsum and/or what's the other thing we use?
Lime, probably.
Lime, yes, sorry, yeah, lime. That's the one. And then it's neutralized and then put into the storage facility. It's important to realise we're not actually elevating the levels of radiation here. We're just taking them out from what we want and putting them back from basically where they came.
And okay, another one here. What level of test work, such as what question is really what pilot scale work has been undertaken to date? And I know pilot work is really important. So I'd also like to ask where that was taken, because it's really the whole world's built on your pilot, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Look, we thought we'd had done enough, and then when a couple of years ago we were actually on a road show through Hong Kong and other places, and a lot of the fund managers, and no disrespect to Linus here, but they were having some commissioning issues at the time, and a lot of the fund managers said to us, "You guys need to do more test work," and so we actually have done that. We ended up taking 12 tons of material. We basically have and took that from site here to WA, and we did the front end of it, the beneficiation, and that process was done at ALS, a lab here in WA, and then the rest of it was done at SGS. And then the final solvent extraction into a rare earth oxide was done over at Anstow in New South Wales. So the scale is significant. We had also input from both equipment manufacturers who were providing the equipment and ultimately will provide the larger plant. We also got relevant engineering bodies like Hatch, for instance, who are hydrometallurgical experts, to come in and ensure that the scale that we were doing was going to be scalable. And so, we've tried to de-risk it as much as we possibly can from that aspect. Wow.
Okay, so it's a $1 billion project, probably run for 100 years. How do you? I'll ask the question because I'm interested. I mean, you haven't given away your offtake yet, and I suspect that's where your answer is going to come from. How do you finance a big beastie like this?
Yeah, look, it's we're using a debt-led funding strategy. Obviously, we can't go out and raise $1 billion in equity with a market cap like ours unless there's a key strategic player involved. So we've, as I said, focused on where is our offtake going to be, and it's our your typical auto countries like Germany, France, South Korea, and Japan. Those groups. So securing an offtake agreement with those groups or those OEMs, we hope will encourage their export credit agencies to provide us with guarantees, which will then allow us to get the government or government-backed debt. It's a very similar model to basically what the Japanese did by funding Linus. Linus have got the offtake into Japan through Sojitz, and then the lending came from basically the government through JOGMEC. So we're targeting similar thing. The Australian government, through its critical minerals strategy, obviously wants to be a part of that. And so, as I said earlier, we've got letters of support to the tune of $300 million in debt funding from the Australian government, and we're using that as a bit of a carrot to the offshore governments in order to try and get them to push their off-takers along as well. So it's we're juggling a lot of balls. We think that if we can land or get a clearer line of sight through the offtake and the debt financing, that will give our stock a significant re-rating, which will then allow us to go out and raise the equity the equity component of the project financing.
Well, yeah, and what a blessing it is having those big funds. I mean, it'd be. I mean, the story would sound pretty different if you couldn't throw those. Oh, by the way, we've got 300 million waiting for us. That really transformatory and good on those agencies for the way we push ourselves forward in the world market. Many from John McIntyre from Bear Dolbear. Many thanks for organising the first one of these, and Gavin as the first cab off the rank. Good presentation and well managed. I've actually set up a home studio here, and it's been. I'm glad we got the first one out of the way. Let me say that, because we are going to try and keep that Sydney Mining Club feel, in the way we. One interesting point, of course, Gavin, is that you can see over here in Sydney it's night time. Look, another one here. Great talk, great project. I'm very glad that we in Australia are finally recognising the value add of more downstream ore processing. It's also great to see the Nolans project finally progressing. Cheers. So,
thank you.
That's nice feedback, isn't it? And great that despite the oppression of our respective premiers, and you've got a real jailer over there, haven't you?
No comment.
No comment. No. Not much better than ours, but at least Gladys makes the right noises. I think we're good to wrap up if everyone's happy on that. We've had a good hour together, and I'm very happy, Gavin. Best wishes from all of us here in Sydney, and bring on the mighty project, bring on the mighty North. I might say I'm personally on a group called Australians for Northern Development and Economic Vision, ANDEV, chaired by Gina Reinhardt, and we're very much about pushing any project in the north, and we look just in having a lot of discussions around integrated development zones, which are the new term for special economic zones. In that capacity too, we're most interested to see the north push ahead, and of course the gas from the Beetaloo Basin can find its way to you down that pipeline as well. So that'll see you out for the next 100 years at least as well.
And not to mention where we're at, solar's not really an issue either.
Just at night time.
Just at night time, yeah. I think there was one question I got on email that was relating to the thorium and the uranium in the deposit. Yes, look, we have done tests where we can extract the uranium if we want and sell that, but basically we don't have that social license to do so. So at the moment it's just reporting to the water leach residues. We've got no plans in our current environment to manufacture U3O8 or even thorium for reactors. It's not in any of our plans at this point in time.
But you know where to go and get it later on. It's all going to be in one.
We can. Well, we can, but I think it's something that Australia as a nation needs to change its view on nuclear before we'd even contemplate raising it with the local communities. Yep,
absolutely. I think we have now rounded up on everything, and thanks for picking that one up. I did see it as well, and if I weren't so scattered with holding all of the administration of us together, I might have. Next time I'll be great. So I've single-handed. 2 days out of surgery. And yeah, terrific. I think we're done. I can't see any more. So on behalf of, firstly, thank you everyone who's watched and who's tuned in. And the great thing here is that, we've got people tuning in from everywhere. That's one difference. Normally everyone has to get into the room, but we've got people from very remote areas tuning in. So that's worked really well. Great having all these questions flow. It's not the same great huddle that we have when we get together, but different energy, but still very informative. And best wishes from all of our members for a strong project, and sooner the better. And thanks for coming. And next up, I'll just put a little comment in here. Most likely our next presenter will be the Cadia Gold Mine, which is, I can point out to a Sandgroper, is the largest gold mine in Australia.
I actually used to work for Newcrest, so I'm very familiar with Cadia.
Okay, I can't score that point. Okay. All right. Look, lovely. Great fun being together. On behalf of everybody, I'll sign off now, and thanks very much, Gavin. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.